Hi, everyone. We've reached the end of the month, so we're going to recap some of the great conversations that have been going on in the Humanizing Work community. If you've had a busy month and haven't been able to stay as engaged with the community as you'd like, this recap will serve as a quick highlight reel. We'll link to the original conversation so you can go deeper on any topics that spark your interest. Now, December was a light month. Normally, we have 4 communities of practice: our conference alumni on the first Friday, Scrum Masters and coaches on the second, product owners on the third, and leaders on the fourth. This month, however, because of the holidays, we only had the conference alumni community. The others are going to pick back up in January, so this will be a quick recap.
All right, so here's the recap for that conference alumni community session. Our topic this month was 4 retroactivities that you might use in a retrospective. And it's a bit of a misleading title. We shared 3 remote retroactivities that teams might use, and a 4th that we considered but chose not to do. So the first retroactivity that we shared was something called Visual Explorer cards. Now, for this one, we're going to pop up a visual of what that looked like in the Miro board, because we use Miro for this. And it's a way of giving people some metaphors, some visual metaphors to pick from. And the way that we did this was we asked people to pick a card that they thought best represented the Humanizing Work community to them. And then they would drag it over to a different area, put a name next to it. Once everybody had picked a card that they liked as a metaphor for the community, then we invited people, a few people, not everybody, to share what caused them to pick the card, how is that an apt metaphor for the community for them. This one is really a lot of reflection and interpretation. This one's not, the goal of this particular activity is not necessarily to get people to a decision about what we're going to do in the next sprint, but at least in this session, and frequently when we use this tool in this context, it's a great way for people to start to connect around what matters to them and why the community is important to them. And I loved doing this to reflect with this community on what it means to them. Now, one of the things that we noticed about this one is that there were people asking that, like, well, what do we do next? And it allows us to point out that this activity, like many activities, has a specific spot in a retrospective. It's not the entire retrospective, but it's one of the activities that we would do. So we might use this to start a retrospective, but we would absolutely need some other activities to bring us to some kind of a decision about what to do next in a future sprint.
The second activity, or I guess activity pattern that we looked at and practiced, is where we did it just in the Zoom chat, and we asked interview questions of the group. We used 3 different questions and gave everyone time for focused writing. Turned out to be about 1.5 minutes on each question. And the catch with this was we didn't ask people to share right away like you normally would in the chat window, but rather to write and hold on to it and then share all at once when everyone was ready, which avoided anchoring bias. So this was nice for a group interview to see more thoughtful responses from all the people in the group. And then we did a little bit of debrief on each one, discussing what patterns they saw in the different answers and kind of responding to what was out there. One participant highlighted the power of this one to bring out quiet voices who might not speak in a high-speed, out-loud brainstorming kind of situation. Because everybody has time to think and write, this one includes some of those personalities that we often forget about when we're doing group facilitation. It tends to be more friendly to the extroverts, the out loud thinkers, and kind of sideline the people who want to get their thoughts together first. Now, this one, like the Visual Explorer cards, only fits in certain spots in the facilitation arc. So we talked about that a little bit and where you might use this one and where you'd probably want to avoid it.
Now, just contrasting these 2 activities, the first one really focuses on visuals, and you don't need words for that one. The second one is all words. And one of the things that we're trying to illustrate with these different examples is that different people have different preferences for how they think, how they like to interact. And so we're trying to take advantage of those different preferences to hear different things than we would normally hear. So those 2 mix it up. Start with visuals where you don't need words, go to just words, but give people some time to think. And then the third one utilizes a different frame. The third one is called constellations. And this is a remote version of something that we've done frequently in person. I'll describe the in-person version briefly and then share how we did that in Miro. A constellation is essentially using the space in a room. So we had visuals, we had our written word, and here we have space as kind of the third lens to look through. the way a constellation works is you put a statement on a piece of paper, drop it in the middle of the floor, and ask people to stand closer to that piece of paper if they strongly agree with the statement, further away if they agree less strongly with it. And so this allows people to use space. And then kind of like the first one, we ask people to share, hey, what caused you to stand where you're standing? We hear different perspectives on that. A couple of different patterns emerged in this one. One is where you can just take a single thing and constellate around that. We also did a constellation where we picked two different poles. Do you agree more strongly with this statement or that statement? And then we even did one with a triangle with like three things that mattered, where there was thing one, thing two, and then thing three at the top. And we asked people to put their sticky in the right spot. So people's names were on the stickies that represented them as people, and they could move around. This one was towards the end of the session. We were running a little short of time, and so we didn't do a full debrief on this. But at one point, Tricia asked, what question would you ask next? And we noticed an interesting pattern here, which is that the recommended questions were all trying to get the group to converge or make a decision or move towards a decision at least. And at that point in the activity, we weren't ready to do that yet. And so it was just an interesting thing to take note of, that a lot of us are uncomfortable in that exploration, messy middle phase. And we have this tendency to want to move it to a decision as quickly as possible. But the real power of constellations, just like some of the other ones that we shared today, is in exploring the space a little bit and allowing people time to reflect and to start to get to group interpretations of why those patterns showed up in the first place.
Now, in addition to these three facilitation techniques or patterns, we also ended up sharing a ton of tips for how to use the tools well, in this case, Zoom and Miro, but you could apply it to a lot of other tools, as well as a lot of general facilitation advice. Like, for example, when we did the silent writing and then sharing, we practiced 3 different ways of keeping track of when the group is ready to share. So lots of little tactical things in there, and then some things about overall approach and what kinds of questions to ask. It was actually, for me, a surprisingly content-rich session. I kind of expected it to be just, we do a retro using these 3 things and maybe they can take them away. But it was just packed with tips from us, from Tricia, from other participants who facilitated these things. It was really dense. So lots of techniques to help you level up for your next retro.
As always, existing community members can access the link to the original Zoom recording below the video. This particular community is made up of our alumni of our annual conference. So if that's you, and if you want to get on the discussions as they happen, go ahead and reach out and we'll get you the info to register. If that's not you, we encourage you to keep an eye out for the announcement for when our next annual conference will take place. Thanks, everybody.